in America right now, I know that we have these political polarizations that have been exacerbated because of Donald Trump. America is having less of a battle between Republicans and Democrats. More than anything right now, guys, we are having a war between very powerful and wealthy evangelical Christians and the rest of society that does not want to be dominated by evangelical Christianity. And so what's happening is a whole bunch of Christians that want a more Christian world are willing to side with the evangelical Christians who want a Christian nationalist government. And that's actually what the predicament we're facing, because you have the Heritage Foundation and the Manhattan Institute and these really wealthy evangelical Christian interests, and they are funding the Republican political movement. And they do, in fact, want a Christian dictatorship. That is the goal. The goal is a theocratic government. And you see it already with Oklahoma Superintendent Ryan Walters announces Oklahoma will become the first state in the U.S. to bring the Bible back into classrooms. This is their goal. They want the Bible back into public schools. They want to start indoctrinating all the children in, elementary school with the Bible. Kindergarten, get it in there, scriptures right off the bat. This is why they want to destroy the Department of Education. They talk about educational whatever curriculum, but the Department of Education does not handle any curriculum whatsoever. It is merely the governing body that requires all the states obey federal law, and they don't, impinge anyone's rights according to the Constitution. Primarily, the Department of Education prevents states from doing what Ryan Walters here is doing, which is putting the Bible back into public schools. The Bible got removed from public schools. Basically, 1963 was when it ended. 1964 was then the civil rights movement. But if you look at the history of America, guys, and this is very ugly, is the Bible being in schools also coincided with when segregation was legal and there was a lot of open racism. Because, you ready for this? Segregation and slavery were fueled by Christianity. The Bible said it was okay to have slaves as long as you were nice to them. And in fact, the Bible makes it seem like the people owning the slaves were doing them a favor. So this Christian sort of segregationist racism thing has been very interwoven. Now, you got Ryan Walters here putting the Bible in state schools. They're going to destroy the Department of Education, Donald Trump is. And when they do that, you are going to see this same shit. I'm calling it now. You're going to see it in Alabama, in Louisiana, in South Carolina, right? You're going to see it maybe in Kansas, in Iowa. You're going to see it in every red state that has a Republican state legislature control. They are going to start putting the Bible back into public schools. They've been trying to do this, guys. They've been trying to sort of roll back the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they've been trying to get the Bible back in schools. That's their mission. Now, a lot of Christians who are like God-fearing are willing to side with them because they're doing Christian things, even though they're f***ing crooks. And so states' rights, though, is really about Christian control. It's what it was. And, if you go way back, it was about slavery. And then it became about segregation. And now what states' rights is. It's certain states want to be religious dictatorships, essentially. It's always the religious minority that usually controls the state legislature that wants this shit. But now, what does this have to do with Pete Hegseth? So the problem with Pete Hegseth is his Christianity. He has a bunch of tattoos that are super controversial. So this is the guy that they want to be the head of the Department of Defense. Everybody's freaking out by a couple of this guy's tattoos. In particular, let's start with this one. This one right here is called a Jerusalem cross. Now you have J.D. Vance, and now pay attention here because here's where it gets wild, because J.D. Vance says they're attacking Pete Hegseth for having a Christian motto tattooed on his arm. This is disgusting anti-Christian bigotry from the AP, and the entire organization should be ashamed of itself. Now, in and of itself, this is the usual Republican play where J.D. Vance is making this whole deal of like, aha, see, they're discriminating against Christians. Now, this has been a long time play for them about wanting this idea of religious freedom. They believe that their religion should allow them to discriminate against people. They should be able to not provide services for LGBTQ people, or refuse to do health care for LGBTQ people. But the problem is this is what the Christians did prior to the Civil Rights Act. They used their Christianity as a cudgel to be racist, to be sexist, to be bigots. It's been heavily tied in with the KKK and the America First movement. You can Google it. You can look at what the America First movement was. We'll just give you a little sample of what the America First movement was traditionally. It was these guys. It was the KKK, One God, Christian, America First. It's a very well-known American movement. This image is really important. This is the 50s, but look at this. It says race mixing is communism. They did not want to end segregation. And you look at these people, right? This is like my parents' teenage years, my parents' 20s is when this was going on. It's one generation above us right now when they were threatening that mixing races, ending segregation was communism. Now, this is still the playbook that they're using with modern day American Christianity, with all their dog whistles about Detroit and DEI and all this shit. Now they're implying that equity programs or diversity programs are essentially communism, or those types of programs are some type of discrimination against white people, but it's all tied to this inherent racism that is tied to old school American racist Christianity. So now J.D. Vance is trying to portray this campaign against Pete Hegseth, saying it's oppressing Christians. Now, why do they want to create a narrative that Christians are oppressed? Because if they can create a narrative that Christians are oppressed, then they can weaponize Christians to start imposing more Christian laws under the guise of, hey, we're being repressed, so we're going to pass these laws to sort of protect Christianity. He's trying to paint it as though Hegseth has this Christian motto and there's this anti-Christian bigotry. But now let's go into this. Pete Hegseth, the Army National Guard veteran and Fox News host nominated by Donald Trump to lead the Department of Defense, was flagged as a possible insider threat by a fellow service member due to the tattoo he has that's associated with white supremacists. This guy, this tattoo right here, is a problem. This is a Jerusalem cross. It was an emblem that was used during the Crusades. So this tattoo that Mr. Hegseth is wearing is not simply, some Christian tattoo. I guarantee you can go to churches all across America of good old-fashioned Christian Americans up and down this country, and you are not going to find run-of-the-mill Christians who have this tattooed on their body. This is a commitment. This is the Crusades. The symbol itself signifies this idea of using violence to conquer via Christianity. And in fact, where it is used in white supremacist movements. He's got another thing here that says "du volt." It says God wills it. The right-wing groups have sort of adopted this. Now, this is what we get into with this idea of plausible deniability. Remember the white supremacy groups doing the okay symbol? We've seen it. You have the guys, Joe Biggs from the Proud Boys and Jack Posobiec, who is a hardline Trumper guy. They start adopting this symbol. It used to be a totally normal hand sign that was not widely used. But then the white supremacists like Jack Posobiec and like Joe Biggs and Patriot Front and all this, they started doing this symbol as a signifier. Now let's go look at Joe Biggs at the Capitol.
So we just stormed the Capitol.
You see this? These are the guys at the insurrection. We just stormed the Capitol, but what are they doing? They're doing their little sign. It is a gang sign that white supremacists and people who support the far-right white supremacy movement are using that sign. It is their indicator. You look at Kyle Rittenhouse, and what are they doing? They're doing the okay sign. This is how they identify with the movement. You look at the Proud Boys, and you see these guys. Everywhere they go, they're now flashing their little gang sign, their little Proud Boy white power movement. Now, we know these signs. The FBI, law enforcement knows these signs. There are police that are doing this because the police and the white supremacy movements are heavily involved with one another. They're letting it be known that they're all part of that movement. There are police officers doing this sign. It is really prevalent. Now, of course, our police force is heavily aligned with white supremacy because police used to be slave patrols. But now where I'm leading with this, guys, is the same group of people that are using these signs, the same group of Capitol stormers that are using that as their little gang sign to signify their far-right movement. They are using this phrase, "do vault." And this phrase is the phrase that is the motto of that symbol. You see where I'm going with this? "Do vault" has been adopted as a slogan by a variety of Christian right and Christian nationalist groups, as well as alt-right and white supremacist groups. These guys tend to be heavily into like Islamophobia. They're heavily into anti-LGBTQ. They're heavily into white power. They're the people who stormed the Capitol when they believed that Donald Trump should have won the election. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this is the other reason they adopt this stuff, guys, is because the Crusades were a time when they used war. Believe me when I tell you this, the groups of the Proud Boys and the Patriot Front and the people and the shit that use this stuff, they are attracted to this because the Crusades and the time when du vault and you know, the Jerusalem cross were the sign of the times, they were willing to go to war for Christianity to reign supreme. And what's interesting about it is how it's all under sort of plausible deniability, because you could ostensibly say, well, the Jerusalem cross is a really historic Christian symbol, but it's not. It's a symbol of the Crusades, and the Crusades were not a good time in Christianity. The "do vault" slogan has also been used by perpetrators of right-wing terrorism. It was used by the guy who did the Quebec City mosque shooting. One of the tattoos on the body of the perpetrator of the Allen, Texas. Remember the outlet mall? All those bodies laying outside the outlet mall? It was among the slogans and symbols used during the Unite the Right at Charlottesville. The slogan, as well as other Knights Templar imagery, has also been associated with far-right subgroups that merge Christian nationalism with gun culture. A gun manufacturer engraved the slogan on its Crusader model of AR-15. So they make AR-15s that are called the Crusader, and then this shit is embraced by a lot of these far-right groups. Now, the problem is the guy they want to nominate for Department of Defense, Donald Trump, wants this Fox News contributor, mind you. He has no history of working in government defense or in any of the lateral industries associated with it. He is a Fox News contributor who is heavily connected to a very far-right movement. Now, let's look at Peter Hegseth's tattoos, because he's got some doozies. The whole combination of the AR-15 and the flag, it's super weird because combining a symbol of terrorism with an American flag, to me, is just problematic. The word "do vault" is engraved on his arm, and that Jerusalem cross and the whole idea of identifying with the Crusades are that attraction to this idea that it's okay to use religious violence in order to ordain the word of God. And he has a 13-star American flag, which is the American flag at the founding of the United States. That's like the original American colonies, which were very, very Christian. They were Calvinist. They believed that their wealth was a sign of being blessed by God. They were also slave owners. The people that came here were Calvinists who enslaved people to get rich. And then they simultaneously believed their Bible allowed them to enslave their fellow humans, and that the riches they got from enslaving those people was a sign that they were God's chosen people. It's like a doubly toxic cocktail. What else has he got? See, this snake is join or die. A political cartoon showing the disunity in the American colonies originally in the context of the French and Indian War, 1754. So if you look at the combined total, though, of this guy, like, let's just take this all in. So this guy has a join or die with some Hebrew words, God wills it, and crusader tattoos, along with we the people. This guy is all tattooed up with this idea of like crusading to enforce God's will and either join us or die. The general ethos of his tattoos are, if you ain't with us, we're going to f you up. You might ask, what's the significance of this? So in the grander scheme, guys, remember earlier when I said that right now America has this battle between evangelical Christianity and everything that is not evangelical. Well, if you look at the billionaire evangelical Christians, they believe that they can encourage the second coming of Jesus in this lifetime. They want to provoke the rapture. They believe it's coming. Now, according to Revelation, the big sign of the coming of the rapture, it's when the whole world descends on the Middle East. So ostensibly, what it would look like to these guys, to a person like Peter Hegseth and these Proud Boys, would be the idea that, say he becomes the head of the Department of Defense. Everyone else in Trump's cabinet is wildly pro-Israel. They want to allow Israel to start expanding their territory in the Middle East. So then Israel goes in and starts destroying the Muslim temples, like their holy sites, which would trigger all of the Muslim nations then to pile in on Israel, which could trigger all of the other nations to come in and pile in on the Muslim nations, which a war of the whole world pouring into the Middle East conflict like that, to the evangelicals higher up in the U.S. government, the people that this guy rolls around with, that would mean Jesus is coming back. So the reason why they're not worried about this is because they think it's their ticket off the planet, guys. Now, those of us who know that all these religions are man's creation know that's not actually going to happen. Nobody's going to get bounced off the planet. We're just going to have a catastrophe. But Trump is appointing people at the high levels of government that believe Trump was sent by God. I mean, you've seen it with the shooting, and they're like laying hands on him. I mean, dude, this is crazy shit. And there are ministers in these really big evangelical churches in the South who have been preaching to their congregations that Trump is like anointed by God. I know you've seen it. I know you've seen it. This is why there's cult-like behavior, guys. This is not an accident. Now, again, the problem we have is J.D. Vance and these other guys that want to advance this end of times Christianity movement. They're trying to portray that, no, he's not a white supremacist. This is anti-Christian bigotry. So therefore, when we start putting the Bible in the public schools, we're just combating anti-Christian bigotry. And they've created this entire idea that LGBTQ or trans people were part of some crazy demonic ideology that was, guess what? Oppressing Christian people. This whole culture war is designed to enact a Project 2025 style Christian theocratic dictatorship in America. And then that Christian theocratic dictatorship is going to create a world war in the Middle East in order to bring Jesus back. That's what it's all about. They're trying to justify their authoritarianism by painting everything that's not them as some threat to Christianity. Now, the Christians that aren't crazy evangelicals are prone to vote for other Christians, especially when those Christians are telling them that all the gay people or all the trans people are the devil. And like, they obviously don't want to do anything that could threaten them burning in hell for eternity. So when you look even at regular run-of-the-mill Christians, they're pretty pliable and pretty easy to manipulate in this whole thing because they've been programmed their entire life, maybe 40, 50 years, to fear eternal damnation. But man, this guy has a lot of extremist signs on him. And like, again, why do you have all these multiple signs of Christian extremism on your body? We don't need a return to the Crusades. Now, Trump is trying to have our entire Defense Department be run by a member of this movement, which would mean a massive infiltration of the Proud Boys and Patriot Front and all those groups into the U.S. government, which is part of what Project 2025 wants. They want a massive infiltration. That's what we're talking about, guys, is the advocacy of violence, and specifically religious violence. This is a big deal. And now J.D. Vance is out here trying to portray this as some sort of religious oppression. You got to understand, guys, you know, I know we have a lot of people online who are like, damn, are the Republicans just okay with authoritarianism? And it's like, they absolutely are. As long as that authoritarianism is Christian, as long as it is rooted in this type of Christianity that is about whiteness and going to war with anybody who's not a Christian and creating the end times to bring about the second coming of Jesus, they don't care if we're a dictatorship as long as it is ordained by the Jesuit God. And that's what we're dealing with, guys. That's why they're not worried about Project 2025. They're not afraid of it because ostensibly it's their ticket off the planet.